welcome back to my channel. Yes, I'm in my pajamas editing this interview with the one and only. And guys, when I tell you I had this conversation with one of the most amazing people, and I met this person at an event last year that changed my life, and his speech or his little like pep talk out on stage was one of the best I have ever heard. And his background story, I mean, he was arrested more than 20 times. He's now a multi-millionaire, owns his own company for prepping food, and he just serves some of the most amazing people in this world, and he is an amazing human himself. So I knew I had to do a little introduction even if I'm in my pajamas today. So I hope you learn a lot from this conversation, and it does go on for a long time. And I will say, like, the first half is all about his story and personal development. The second half has a lot of little gems where he talks about how you can become rich, how you can start investing, what you can do to start making money, and it's honestly mind-blowing. I took notes on this myself. So enjoy, watch it till the very end, or if you want to skip to the very end, that also works for me. And yeah, hope you like it. I know you've been arrested more than 20 times, but now you are a multimillionaire and you are the CEO of your company, Nutrition Solutions. But you started off kind of rough. I know your dad left when you were 16. Your mom gave birth when she was 16, right?
So actually, my dad took off before I was even born. My mother had me at 16. She was a drug addict, had a lot of problems. And just due to the nature of her circumstances, I was put early on into the care of the system. So I spent a lot of time in foster care, also in juvenile detention centers and jail cells. And, I was exposed to a lot of trauma early on. And unbeknownst to myself, all of that trauma was actually a huge blessing because it was instilling in me characteristics and attributes that would serve me later in life, that would inevitably allow me to go on to do things with my life that are considered to be statistically impossible. So I was arrested 17 times before my 18th birthday, another half a dozen times after that. I had multiple felonies on my record. And one day I just woke up and got to a point where I was just disgusted with myself, and I didn't recognize the person I saw in the mirror. And I knew that I needed to make some changes. I just truly had absolutely no idea what those changes could be. I did not know where to start. And I went to somebody who I trusted very much and looked up to and respected. And I basically put my cards out on the table. I let him know what my current situation was. And I told him that I don't need any handouts. I just would absolutely love if he could just point me in the right direction. Because I feel like at the time I felt like I had a higher calling. I just truly had no idea what it was. And he put me on to two things, gave me two pieces of advice that changed my life, and to this day continues to change my life. The first was he told me that I needed to surround myself with people who were better than me. And he said I needed to spend every waking moment working on my personal development. And this was in 2000, I would say 2008, 2009, when I started my personal development journey. At that time, there wasn't the same resources that are available now, with the podcast and YouTube being as just
Right.
abundant in content. So I read a lot of books, and at that time I was a drug dealer, so I had a tremendous amount of free time on my hands. So I basically I got addicted early on. The first book I read was Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And I just loved the information that I was consuming. It was putting me in a much different headspace than I was used to being in. And I liked that version of myself. So I got addicted to it. I think personal development is the most addictive, efficacious drug. Unfortunately, I've done a lot of drugs. I've tried a lot of different drugs. And I will say personal development is, no question, the most addictive.
I completely agree with you, but I feel like you really have to invest yourself and your time in order to start getting that addiction. But I want to hit a point that you actually mentioned. You said that you found yourself in this place where you were disgusted with who you were. in a bad situation and you want it to change. And I noticed that a lot of people, especially because in this age, like there's so much comfort that a lot of people just wait until they hit rock bottom to start that journey. Did you wait until everything was a complete mess, or did you kind of decide, I don't want to get to that point yet?
Unfortunately, I waited till the very end. Before we go on, can you see me okay? I feel like my head is chopped off on my end. It wasn't initially. Can you see my full?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure you don't have
You're good.
a headless guest on your show.
You're good. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, so a lot of people wait until they hit rock bottom because we live in like an area where there's like so much comfort that, if you're okay, you're not excellent, people are okay with being okay. Did you wait until you were just at rock bottom, or did you take action before you hit that place?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I would love to tell you that I was ahead of the power curve, and I jumped on it as soon as I realized I could be doing better. But I basically allowed my life to spiral out of control, and reached a point where, again, I was just ashamed of everything that I was doing. I was living a lie. My life was very, even though I didn't have a real job, and I was making a bunch of cash, and I lived life basically on my terms, which is really what we strive to do as entrepreneurs, to achieve freedom with our time. And I did have that, but I didn't earn it. So I was living it, that lifestyle, in a very disingenuous way. And I just was stressed all the time because I was constantly telling a lie. I was living a lie. My entire life at that point was a series of lies. And I just got to a point of intolerance. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. I remember a pivotal moment in my journey, which really kind of helped me realize that it was time to draw a line in the sand and start making some changes. Is I was meeting a girl that I liked, years ago. I was meeting her mom for the first time. And when, you meet somebody for the first time, one of the things that is ordinarily asked is, oh, so what do you do? And, I had a story, a cover story that I had told and said thousands of times. But I remember when I said it to her in that moment, I just felt just deep feelings of shame. And I analyzed those feelings, and I started to recognize that it wasn't going to get any better. And the reason I was feeling like that is because basically my higher self was looking down on the person that I was at that point, the things that I was doing, and it wasn't happy with what it was seeing. So I realized I needed to make some changes. So I did just that.
Okay. I see that. So, do you think there's a way for someone to change without having to hit rock bottom, or do you think people need to have that wake up moment?
Yes, but it's very difficult and it is not ordinary. Typically, it takes getting to a very, very low place or having some traumatic event happen. I mean, even for me, when I walked away from my previous life and started my business, the first, 3 to 4 years of my business, I wasn't really committed. I mean, if you would have asked me at the time, I certainly would have said that I was, but I was just unaware. I wasn't really applying myself. I wasn't doing my best. I had absolutely no passion towards the business. In fact, I looked at my business as being quite inconvenient. And I would just say to myself and think to myself, I wish I was doing this. I wish I was doing that. I should be doing all these other things. And just a disadvantageous mindset for the direction that I wanted to take my life in. In 2015, I was arrested for crimes that I committed in 2012. So imagine for a moment that you transition away from a life of organized crime effectively. And I'd done that. And in my mind, I had made a clean break. I walked away. I was done. 3 years after the fact, I'm building my business, and we're not doing amazing, but I'm making an honest living. I'm going to bed every night like comfortable, not having the fear or thought that maybe my door is going to get kicked in that night. But it took me basically getting arrested and going through an extensive legal process where I was facing up to 14 years in prison. It was an absolutely crazy ordeal. It drained my finances, it drained my mental energy, and it really woke me up. And I was very fortunate to have a fair judge, and I was very fortunate to have a lot of people that supported me during that process. And the judge really looked at what I had done the previous 3 years to begin to, turn my life around and all the positive changes that I made. And she came to the conclusion that sending me to prison didn't make sense. I mean, the purpose of prison is rehabilitation, and she had came to the conclusion, fortunately, that I'd done that on my own. At the time that, everybody that we're recording this, that most people will be watching it, I mean, I could still be in prison, and I planned on walking in that courtroom that day, and there was a very strong possibility that I wouldn't be walking out on my own free will. So when I walked out of the courtroom that day, I obviously was a bit relieved, but at the same time, I just had a painful but necessary realization that I needed to do better. And I basically committed to working the absolute hardest that I was capable of every second of every day, and taking care of the people who I had around me at that time, a team that supported me and friends that supported me during a time where a lot of people did not. And that was a huge driving factor. I entered 2016 broke and in $100,000 of immediate debt. Again, the legal process drained my finances as well as took my focus and attention away from the business for many, many months. So when I entered 2016, I was broke, but I had a plan, and my plan really just revolved around being very, very intentional with being the best, and being the best leader I could be. And being the best leader I could be would entail me spending time developing my team. I believe as a leader, you have two primary responsibilities: winning and making your team better. And up until that point, I didn't really have that mentality, and I adopted that mentality. I started organizing my day on paper, writing down my goals, setting goals. I never had goals. I mean, it's pretty easy to go absolutely nowhere if you don't have a destination in mind. 2016, I again ended the year broke and in 100 grand in immediate debt, and within 18 months, I was a millionaire. And I think that that's a testament to the power of getting pissed off, because that's exactly what I did. I got pissed off. I became intolerant of the life that I was living and the circumstances of my life. And I basically committed to doing anything and everything that I needed to do for as long as I needed to do it to get to a point where I was actually proud of the man that I saw when I looked in the mirror.
Wow. Hold on. So you went through this phase, and I heard you talk about this on a different interview that I was listening to, and you went through this phase where you weren't really striving towards a goal. You were trying to escape like the bad life and the consequences that you had created.
Yeah,
So your motivation wasn't really working towards something. It was trying to get out of that rut that you had created. So
correct.
when people look for motivation to start something, should they look for the consequences, what's going to happen, or should they look more towards the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the person. Everybody's wired differently, but for me, what, got me inspired to start taking action was the thought and idea of what my life would look like if I didn't make those changes. Change is hard, but being in the exact same position as you are now in 10, 15, 20 years from now, that is a lot harder, I would certainly argue. So for me, it was that thought of, what life would look like and what I would look like if I didn't make the necessary changes. And that thought, it scared the hell out of me. And it scared me into taking the necessary action that I needed to take to, again, begin to create a life that I could actually be proud of.
And when you started creating that life, I know that I heard a little bit of the story of how you started Nutrition Solutions. And it was the owner relapsed, right? Everybody was getting their meals. The owner relapsed, and then
Man,
they
that's an old that's an old interview. I
yeah,
haven't
yeah,
heard that. Wow, good for you for doing your due diligence.
thanks. No, it's actually one of my favorite ones too. I think I listened to it twice or three times. But you said that the guy stopped doing business, everybody stopped receiving the meals, and you kind of just stepped in. Now, what I find really interesting is that if I stopped receiving some kind of product that I'm ordering from Amazon or such, like I wouldn't even have that idea of like stepping into the business. So, like, did someone offer you that opportunity? Did you create it? Like, where did that come from?
Well, it was just one of those things where the ball was in motion, and unfortunately, the individual that I so basically what it was it was a different company that basically I was almost like an ambassador for it because I knew a lot of people and I had a significant network and I was getting a bunch of customers. And it started off basically with me just being able to get my meals for free, which I was really happy about. And then as I got more and more customers, then they started giving me commissions and such. But it got to a point where, yeah, the individual who was responsible for the operation, he basically relapsed. He was a drug addict, alcoholic, and he fell off the wagon, as they say. And I had a choice at that point. There was people that were relying on me because I was the liaison in the city that I was living in at the time to provide this service that they were getting used to. And I just did what I needed to do to keep it going. And it was a huge blessing in disguise because I was able to take control. I was able to, get my own staff and just have a little bit more control and really prioritize the customer service element and just introduce different layers to the business that were previously not there. I mean, when I started in this world, I will be honest with everybody watching this, the food that we were selling at that time. Admittedly, I wouldn't feed that to my dog at this stage of my life. I would not feed that to my dog even. But at the time, like my standards were a lot different than what they are. And I probably thought it was really good at the time, and other people certainly did. But that's the beautiful part about life and growth in general is as you evolve and you grow and you become something more, you look back at things that you did and look at scenarios in your life that you at one point deemed as acceptable and you just kind of cringe looking at it. And that's usually indicative of the fact that you are growing.
Yeah, and how did you know it was the right thing? Because I mean, you might have felt like that it was, you needed to step in, but a lot of people choose to ignore that because it's too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, I mean, I've been through a lot of hard things. Had a, pretty, unconventional childhood, if you will. I was in the military. I went through some pretty difficult military training. So hard wasn't really a phenomenon I was unfamiliar with. I dealt with hard uh, at at length throughout the course of my lifetime. So it wasn't so much the difficulty of it. It was just a matter of just jumping in there and recognizing that if one other person can do it, not only can I can do it better, but I can do it more efficiently. I can do it shorter because the playbook is already there, and all I need to do is I need to take the playbook of what's working based off what I've seen, and then I need to just focus on making that better. So I wasn't starting from complete scratch because I had worked with this company for a period of time. I was able to learn a few things, and then the rest of it, I mean, honestly, I just learned as I went. And to be honest with you, I'm still learning as I go.
Yeah, I think learning never really ends.
It does not.
Yeah. And so to someone who is maybe like an opportunity comes by or they feel kind of stuck where they are and they just don't know where to start and they're just waiting for a handout. They're waiting for someone to tell them what to do. How do they start, whether it's like fitness or a goal they have or to just get out of this blueprint that their parents or the school has set for them?
Yeah, it really comes down to the acceptance of personal responsibility. I think objectively, what separates winners from losers is personal responsibility. Winners take responsibility over everything. I often say that, everything is your fault. All of your problems are your fault. And it's true. And a lot of people don't like to hear that. A lot of people in our current society, unfortunately, there's an epidemic of victim mentality out there. And the problem with the victim mentality is if you view yourself as a victim, then you basically hinder your ability to grow and cut off any chance that you have of experiencing feelings of happiness. So,
And you talk about the modern day slavery a lot, and I found one of your episodes particularly like really interesting because you said that if being in this place of comfort, being in this victim mindset, and just being told what to do, if that doesn't motivate you, then you deserve to stay in that place. So, but how would someone realize that they're being controlled?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to personal development. I think personal development is the most important work of our life. The work that you do when you're in the office, when you're in the factory, when you're actually in the workplace, pales in comparison to personal development, because personal development teaches you how to think different. The person that I am today, I 100% attribute to the books that I've read. I've read a lot of books, and the books that I've read basically helped me recalibrate my mentality. It taught me how to think different. It made me acutely aware of the fact that I had a victim mindset. I personally had a victim mindset for quite some time. And the thing about everybody who has every single person that has a victim mindset, and there's tens of millions of them, if not more, they have one thing in common, every single one of them, and that's the fact that they're not aware of the fact that they have a victim mindset. But through my personal development journey, I started to learn to think different, and I started to kind of understand my own behavior and understand why I thought the way that I did and why I did things the way that I did. And looking at things from just a completely different perspective, I was able to just make some radical adjustments in the way that I carried myself and my character in general. And, shortly after, good things started to happen.
Wow. And so for someone who is young like me or watching this video a little bit older maybe, what would be the first step towards starting their self-development journey?
I think it's two things. I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think that you need to get super serious about fitness, regardless of what your goals are, regardless if you're male, female, it doesn't matter. Be in the gym consistently, eat good. You want to develop the self-discipline that comes from being in the gym as early on as possible, because it will serve you in a multitude of other capacities in other areas of life later in life. And the earlier you get that in your DNA, the earlier you instill those attributes in your character, the higher probability you have of succeeding at an earlier age. And then the second thing is go all in on your personal development. Personal development, I mean, I personally believe that everybody should be, depending on where you're at, if you're just starting, you should be spending no less than 1 hour a day on personal development. That's what I did. And honestly, I still do personal development every day, every single day. And as accomplished as I am, I have millions of dollars in the bank. I don't need to.
There we, there we go. Sorry about the interruption.
I genuinely do not recall exactly what I was saying. Where did we leave off?
Self-development, you were jumping into the second thing, how somebody, depending on their journey, where they're at, they need to spend more than 1 hour or so.
Yeah. I mean, look, if we're talking about laying it all out, if somebody wanted to know exactly what to do, like a fail-safe formula to becoming a more evolved version of themselves, 1 hour of personal development mandatorily every day. I personally prefer to do personal development first thing in the morning. I like to put something positive and uplifting, educational, informative in my brain. And the thought process there is, if I learn something, if I extrapolate a lesson from the pages of the books that I'm reading, I then have the rest of the day to apply those things, because that's really what's more important than anything. Learning and just having knowledge is good, but the magic happens on the other end of the execution. So I start every single day with a workout, and then as I'm going through my finances, planning my day, I'll then spend 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour, reading. And the reality of it is, I probably spent between 1 to 3 hours a day reading in the first 6 to 7 years of my personal development journey, because I had a lot of work. I mean, it was funny because the more I read and the more I learned, the more I became acutely aware of how little I actually knew. And that was an empowering feeling. It made me just hungry and curious to learn more and to do more. And really, at the end of the day, what personal development is, when you read books or listening to podcasts like this, you're basically in a scenario where you have the opportunity to learn from somebody who is a little further ahead than you are, somebody who perhaps has done something that you aspire to do. And that's the shortcut, really, is to listen to people who are further down the road than you, listen to people who are more intelligent than you, and basically model what they do. It can honestly be that simple. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of young people, they look at, and people your age, they look at 16, 17-year-old YouTubers who are online making a fool out of themselves for views. And they look, oh, this person is so cool. They, hold professional athletes in such high regard. And that's fine. I mean, if you're an athlete and you aspire to be an athlete and have a work ethic similar to, your favorite athlete, that's fine. But that's a small percentage of the people out there. I think when you're young, you're unaware of just how unaware you are. And what's really important is just to kind of have the humility to recognize that you don't know what you don't know, and be open-minded to the chance that, or the possibility that things might not be as they seem. Things may not be the way that you were conditioned to believe that they were, and always explore a different way of doing things. I think as you go through your personal development journey, you start understanding more and more the importance of taking personal responsibility and what exactly that means and what it entails. And it's not easy. It's not easy to, be the one who screws up. And then most people, when they screw up, their immediate default reaction is to blame other people or make excuses and come up with a bunch of stories as to why the situation occurred. But the best thing that you can do, I mean, personal responsibility, when you take personal responsibility, when you take ownership, it's a two-pronged approach. First, you acknowledge the fact that you dropped the ball. And the second part, the most important part, is you go and you fix it and you make it right with either, your customers, your clients, or anybody who might have been let down by your poor decision. And at the end of the day, making poor decisions is a part of the process. There's a massive, massive misconception, perhaps because of the public school system and how we develop a extremely negative association with failure, right? Because if you are not doing well in a class, you're going to be given a grade of F, which constitutes a failure. And that's a really, 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 really bad thing. But in life, failure is actually not a bad thing. Failure is a fantastic thing. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is, in fact, part of success. And the more you fail, the more experience that you get. And as long as you're failing forward, as long as you're, failing forward without a loss of enthusiasm, then it's actually not a failure. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you don't quit, you keep a good attitude, I mean, you're either winning or you're learning, which is a win in and of itself.
I completely agree with you. I think that people who are young are just they're taught that, don't ask for help because it's cheating. Don't fail because it's bad. You're not supposed to move. You're not supposed to do these things. And it kind of builds this mindset of staying in that comfort zone. But you,
I'd like to,
yeah,
on that note, I'm glad that you said that. So one of the best pieces of advice that I wasn't planning on giving today, you just made me think of something. I think that if you are a young person and you finish high school or you're 18 years old, whatever, I think the best thing that you can do to accelerate your personal growth is move away from your hometown. Moving out of your hometown is a life hack. I have done it. I mean, I did it. I've moved multiple times, and every single time it served as a catalyst for explosive growth. I mean, when you move out of the environment that you grew up in, you
yeah,
start to learn more about yourself. You start to learn more about how things actually are. You start to understand that the world is a really, really big place. And like, it's very, very difficult for you to become the best version of yourself. It's actually, I'm going to argue that it's impossible. I don't think it's possible for somebody to become the absolute best version of themselves that they're capable of being by staying in their hometown. I do not think it's possible. Every successful person that I know, and I know a lot,
yeah,
I genuinely cannot think of one
yeah.
right now that still lives in their hometown. Not one. The town they grew up in anyway. So
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I've been moving since I was a kid. I don't think I've stayed anywhere more than like 2 years. And I feel like the more places I go, the more I realize that people are different. There are so many different cultures. And like, it's just, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. It's exactly what you said before. So I think that's a great little thing that somebody can do right after they graduate or whenever they have a chance.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid. A lot of people are like, oh, well, maybe I'm waiting for my friend. He said he'd go. Like, no, don't do
Yeah.
that. Just go and, you know, find work, find a job that you can make a decent living on, right? You don't have to. I think another really important point for the young listeners that are watching this is understanding that you may not always feel immediately passionate about the job that you're doing. You don't have to be proud of your job, but you mandatorily, without exception, have to be proud of your work because it's an extension of you and the work ethic, the discipline, the attention to detail, just the ability to always do a little more and take initiative and bring value and solve problems. Like this is a mentality that is going to serve you endlessly in life. A lot of people make the fatal mistake thinking that once they find the thing that they're passionate about, then they'll start applying themselves. That works out precisely 0% of the time. That's not the way that it works. And the really cool part about that and passion in general is if you're doing something that you're not, overly excited to do, you will actually develop passion in the process of becoming highly competent. The more competent you are in something, the better you get at something. It's funny, not only do you start to enjoy it a little more, all of a sudden now you become passionate. And obviously, nobody likes to do things that they suck at. And unfortunately, most people, they go to a job, they do the least amount of work to not get in trouble and just kind of try to stay in the middle. There's no glory that happens in the middle. And regardless of what your job is, you just have to look at it as an opportunity for your personal growth. Because if you're mopping floors, let's say you're a janitor somewhere, right? It's at some restaurant, you're a janitor and you're cleaning toilets, mopping floors, whatever. If you're doing a really great job and you have a fantastic attitude in the process, I mean, there's a chance that you come into contact with a customer who has a business, who sees your work ethic, who sees how amazing of an attitude you have while cleaning the bathrooms, and that person could potentially give you an opportunity that could change your life. Things like that happen all of the time, but it's not going to just happen. You absolutely have to make it happen, and the way that you make it happen is by being intentional about being the best, taking pride in everything that you do, understanding that it is a reflection of you and the standards that you possess for yourself.
I completely agree with you. I mean, just a couple of months ago, Bedros asked me to join jujitsu, and I had no plans to join jujitsu whatsoever. And I hated it because I was so terrible at it. I was humbled. And then
Yeah.
a couple of weeks later, I started just realizing that I did like it. I just needed to get better at it, and I needed to put in the work. Um, so that being said, I think I touched all my points. You answered most of the questions I had. Um,
Okay.
Thank you for your time, Mr.
Well, I would love if you have a few more minutes, I would
Yeah,
love to give some financial advice for young
yeah,
people out.
absolutely.
Because that's something that's not talked about in schools, unfortunately. And there's a reason for that, because the public school system isn't designed to make you successful. It's designed to basically make you a slave, as you alluded to earlier. The thing about money and finance and financial literacy in general is there's a stigma in society that like talking about it, you shouldn't talk about it. It's a private thing and all that. But if you're not thinking about something, if you're not talking about something, if you're not focused and putting attention into something, that thing, whatever it is, it cannot improve. So if you're, somebody your age who's 16 years old, 17 years old, I got my first job, I think I was 14 or 15. Obviously, you're not going to get the highest paying jobs during that stage of your life. But the beautiful part about that is you don't have any bills. I mean, most people your age do not have any bills, right? So what you want to do is you want to spend less than you make and you want to invest the difference. And honestly, I can't even imagine how much different my life would have been. When I was 18 years old, I joined the military, and during boot camp, they brought this like team of financial advisors in and basically said, they basically walked you through how investing works, and they would take like $100 out of your paycheck each time you got paid twice a month. And they basically showed you, so if you invest $100 a paycheck and you do that for 20 years, at the end of it, it was like, I don't know, maybe something like $70,000 or something that you would have invested. But at the end of at the end of that road,
Yeah.
that actually be worth $1 million. And none of us, I mean, me personally,
Yeah.
that's not what I was hearing. All I heard was, so what you're saying is I'm going to have $200 less a month? Because again, my mindset around money was so poor. But the earlier you can get in the game, the better you're going to be later in life. You have to establish these habits as early as freaking possible. And a lot of there's typically two resistance points that people have as it relates to investing. Because look, nobody is going to save their way to financial freedom. It is not possible. It's not possible. If you save $650 a month, it
Uh-huh.
would take 128 years to be a millionaire. If you invest 650 a month, it would take around 27 years. So you see the difference. Nobody's going to save their way to financial freedom. So you got to get really good at what you do. Whatever it is, become the best at it. Make being the best an intentional act. And then you just have to you have to spend less than you make and invest the difference. And the other resistance point people have is not knowing what to invest in. And I was one of those people. The easiest, safest thing that you can invest in as a new investor, and even as a seasoned investor, I still invest in this myself, is a low cost index fund like the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is basically like it's like the top 500 companies. So you're basically betting on the top 500 companies in the United States. And over the last 70 years, the S&P 500 has produced an on average 9% annual return. So it's fail safe. There's no risk. Obviously, you don't want to be investing money that you need to pay your rent with,
Right.
but allocating a portion of your paycheck, automating it to the S&P 500, I mean, that's probably the best thing that anybody can do to set themselves up for financial freedom later on, because you can get independently wealthy one of two ways, or three ways, I guess. You could become really, really good at a certain skill set that just produces a ton of income. You could invest from a very young age and invest sustainably throughout your lifetime. So at retirement, you have a huge nest egg. Preferably, you want to do both, right? You want to get really good at something, make a lot of money, and invest it so you can make more money.
I'm actually really glad you touched on that because I had someone DM me the other day about like, hey, I've been looking to invest, but I just don't know how. This is why I can't start my business just because I don't know how. What is one thing that you've learned as you got rich that changed your mindset around money to learn how it works? Like, what
Mm.
is one thing that you did?
So I'm going to just tell you the thing that came to mind when you said that. I don't know if this might be a little over the head of the young listener, but it's so important. I As you read about investing and you learn about the markets and you understand that everything is cyclical, one thing that I realized and learned and was able to kind of validate and put into action in 2020 when COVID hit was the best times to buy or when everybody else is panicking and selling and the market is crashing and the world seemingly is coming to an end. That is the best time to buy. The market has crashed numerous times throughout the course of human history. And every single time it has not only bounced back, but quickly reached a new all-time high. When cynicism is high and everybody else is, panicking, panic selling, that's when you want to get in the game. And I had read that numerous times in several books throughout my, personal development journey. And then in 2020, when COVID happened, the market crashed and I saw them like, all right, this is what they were talking about. So I gotta do it. It was a little scary, but that investment, I invested in a few travel stocks that obviously were the most devastated by the state of the economy and state of the world at that time. It was Expedia, Royal Caribbean, which is a cruise line, and then Delta Airlines. And that investment was extremely lucrative. So when things are bad, when cynicism is high and everybody else is panicking, freaking out, and abandoning ship, that's when you want to go all in.
Wow. Yeah, no, I feel like I've heard that piece of advice so many times, but then when the time actually comes to do it, it's
Yeah.
a little bit scary, and that's where a lot of people meet resistance.
Yeah, exactly. And I can definitely see how that would be scary for some. At the end of the day, it's one of those things where you just have to trust the process. You have to look at the people that are putting it out there. I mean, like it's for me, I was very fortunate to read some books that specifically stated that, like, if the market crashes, that's when you want to buy more. When it goes down, you want to buy more. And when this happened, I'm like looking at the screen, I'm looking at the numbers on the screen, and like intuitively, it was a little nerve wracking. It's like, I don't know what's going. Is the world coming to an end? At the beginning of COVID, we didn't really know what the future uh, held in store. But I was like, all right, got to remember my training. I got to remember my training. Got to do it and see what happens. And yeah, that investment that worked out really well.
Wow. So do you have any last piece of advice you want to give, like anything to contribute to like their financial independence, their lifestyle freedom, their purpose?
Yeah, prioritize physical fitness. Get fit and get strong. And the thing about that that's important isn't, how much you can bench press or squat or lift in general. It's the discipline that you cultivate in the process, because that self-discipline that you build in the gym, in order to get results in the gym, you have to work hard, you have to be disciplined, and you have to be consistent. And once you start getting those results, you then realize that that very same process that you apply towards the gym can be pointed and directed at any other area of life that you're looking to conquer. I know a lot of successful people, and the overwhelming majority of them prioritize fitness. Now, not all of them are in as good a shape as I am, but I've dedicated a huge portion of my life to fitness. So I'm not saying you need to look like me or look like, the fitness models on the magazine, but you should aspire on an ongoing basis to look like a better version of yourself, because not only do you develop discipline and work ethic, and again get that understanding of that process and how valuable it is in every other area of your life, but you become more confident. And that's something that's not talked about enough. I think a key characteristic of successful people universally is confidence. The more confident you are, the more likely you are to take that uncertain step forward when you're not quite sure. The more confident you are, the more likely you are to take that chance and to make a move and to act when you don't have it all figured out and you're not exactly sure if it's all going to work out, but you have that confidence of knowing that regardless of what happens, you're going to figure it out. And the second thing again is just personal development. I know it's not a sexy answer. I realize, especially a lot of people your age, this is the part that gets most people. When you're in school, you're forced to read books that have absolutely no practical world purpose. Like, it doesn't benefit you in the real world. You're forced to memorize a bunch of information and read books that you don't want to read and write book reports on books that, again, don't teach you about financial literacy, don't teach you how to have a growth mindset, don't teach you about the importance of self-discipline and finance and all these things. So you have to just change your association, because it's not the same thing. It's a very disingenuous comparison, comparing the reading that you do in the public school system to the reading that you do in personal development. All of the answers to the questions that people have, the roadmap to becoming the most evolved version of you, is in the pages of the books that you're avoiding. So I have a email, on my website, chriscavallini.com, I have a book list on there. It's free. Anybody can go on there, and it's basically like a list of about 50 of my top book recommendations, and it's segmented into different areas like leadership, mindset, finance, and that type of thing. So anybody who's interested in, getting on the path of personal development, that's what a lot of people say, oh, what book should I read? And I hate answering that question. I don't like answering that question. Everybody always asks it. I feel like, and I do answer it, of course, but I feel like it sets a bad precedence, because it's not one book. It's not one book. It's not three books. It's a journey. And if what book should you read? Well, let's reverse engineer the thought process. What is it that you're looking to improve in? If you're looking to improve in your financial literacy, then you need to go read as many finance books as possible until you are where you want to be. And if you want to improve on your leadership skills, then you need to read a book on leadership and so on and so forth.
I'm actually really surprised that you're big on books because I see a lot of people are always talking about like the one video, the one thing, and then just hearing someone talk about like, hey, it's a variety of things, and it's actually found in what people like deem the most boring, which is books. And I've been fortunate enough to just love reading since I was a kid. So
Yeah.
I absolutely love books. And I ordered that one book that you recommended on your stories, the Little Red Sales book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I think that people do associate that a lot with like boring school. And when you learn to dissociate that, then it can become a really powerful tool. And it's not always as it seems. So I never really thought about that way. And I'm really glad that you touched on that.
Yeah, and two other quick things on that point. So I have an Audible account as well. So I like when I'm doing cardio, I'll listen to an audiobook. And for a lot of years, I part of my message around personal development was encouraging people just to listen to audiobooks, because when you're listening to an audiobook, you can just hit play and you go through your morning routine on your commute to and from work or whatever you're doing. It doesn't require you segmenting extra time of the day allocating towards that specific thing. Now, I've kind of changed my position on that, because I think like reading, the physical act of reading, it it's basically like exercise for your brain. Now,
Absolutely.
an argument can certainly be made that when you listen to an audiobook or watch a podcast or, something like that, you're exercising your brain, but it's a completely different thing. And I know, like for me, I retain a hell of a lot more when I'm actually reading the pages. But if you don't have the time, or you don't think you have the time right now, you have absolutely no excuse not to listen to an audiobook. And a common resistance point people have around not listening to audiobooks is, oh, well, I can't really focus on it when I'm not doing this. And they're trying to like remember every single word that was said in a 6 to 12 hour audiobook. And my objective when I read a book is to take one thing away. If I can take one lesson from that book, from that entire book, just one, and apply it into my life, I view that as a win. Because as you read book after book after book, that's lesson after lesson after win. Eventually, all those wins start to add up.
I have one last question on that. So
Yeah.
do you think it's more effective for someone to read a variety of books on like the skill or self-development, whatever they're trying to get into, or to reread certain books?
So, okay,
Okay.
that's an interesting question. So, it takes reading a certain amount of books to get to the point where you know which ones to read over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what I personally think is, for the most part, I think that finding a core group of books, 10 to 15 that you can read over and over again, because as you evolve, as you become a different person, you gain a completely different perspective. You receive the information a lot differently. I mean, I have books that I've read 10 times, literally 10 times. And every single time I've read it, I've taken a different lesson. But I've read over 1,000 books. And it took me reading over 1,000 books to realize that I would have just been better off reading that, 15 titles, as it were.
Okay, so you think someone has to first go through a series of books to then realize which ones to go back on?
Yes, because if you want to get very competent at something, reading one book is not going to get you there. You have to read multiple books, different perspectives, and just start to connect the dots on your own, especially when it comes to things that are just a little more complicated than what they'll teach us in schools, like finance. Finance is a difficult one. It was a very difficult subject for me to grasp onto. I always had a weird resistance towards it. And it wasn't until I really leaned into it that, as you can imagine, it wasn't until I started leaning into it then good things started to happen from a financial perspective in my life.
Well, I love that because I feel like people are so resistant towards things that they are not good at, that they just don't understand. So I
Mhm.
feel like leaning into something absolutely is the best way to start getting to know that thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One more important thing to point out is
Yeah.
that you can't be afraid to suck in the beginning. You have to be willing to suck at the beginning. Everybody who's ever done anything great with their life sucked. They were horrible in the beginning. Every single person. Nobody starts at the top. It's one of those things where, you got to have the humility to, you think you're going to look stupid, but I don't know anybody that is trying something new, trying to better themselves. Like, I look at that as admirable. I look at that as inspiring. And you just have to get over these limiting beliefs and toxic thoughts that are preventing you from taking the necessary action to be the best version of you. If you want to be the best version of you, it's going to require you to suck a lot at a lot of things in the beginning. But if you show up and keep doing your best, eventually what happens over time, your best gets better. Your best might not be good enough in the beginning, but when you continue to show up and keep doing your best and keep doing so with a fantastic attitude, eventually not only does your best get better, but you get to a point where you actually start to enjoy that thing that a very short period of time ago you absolutely despised.
I completely agree with that. No, yeah, no thoughts on that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you did a
thank
really good job. You did a fantastic job. I'm very, very impressed with the way you conducted this interview and the fact that you're 16 and on the mission that you're on. I respect it so much, and I hope that keep in touch. If there's anything I can do to help you or serve you in any way, I got you.
Thank you, Chris. And I think you opened my eyes up as to what I could do better when talking to people and when interviewing people. So thank you for that. All right, you guys. Yes, I'm still in my pajamas because I'm still editing this. But if you listen to that episode the whole way through and you're one of the few and true 1%ers, congrats and kudos to you. Now, I want you, if you like this and you want to see more conversations with people millionaires that are successful, that have done what you want to do, then click the subscribe button because I'm going to be bringing on some amazing guests. Now, thank you for watching this. Click the subscribe button, comment down below what your favorite part was, and make sure to follow on my socials, TikTok, Instagram, and my channel.